Hey there, thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Nick Blumberg. Paris Schutz has the evening off. The Supreme Court weighs a key ballot challenge to former President Donald Trump.
It'll come down to just a handful of states that are going to decide the presidential election. That's a pretty daunting consequence.
For an insurrection, there needs to be an organized, concerted effort.
So the point is that a chaotic effort to overthrow the government is not an insurrection?
While a majority of justices appear skeptical of arguments to keep Trump off the Colorado ballot, a Cook County judge rules a challenge to Trump appearing on the Illinois primary ballot can move forward. ShotSpotter officials try to make the case that their controversial technology keeps Chicagoans safer at a public meeting and get a mixed reception from residents and activists. This as Mayor Brandon Johnson debates renewing the company's contract. Meanwhile, the mayor sits down with Governor J.B. Pritzker and Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle amid tensions over how to tackle the ongoing migrant crisis.
Inside the 30, Hester's going to take it all the way for a touchdown.
And Devin Hester joins two other Chicago Bears greats, Julius Peppers and Steve McMichael, who've been voted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Gregory Pratt from the Chicago Tribune, Monica Ang from Axios, Politico's Shia Kappas, and Paul Sullivan from the Chicago Tribune. Let's get right to it. Greg Pratt, the case challenging former President Trump's eligibility to appear on Colorado's ballot went before the Supreme Court. Many of the justices did not seem particularly interested in kicking him off. Any surprise there?
No, the guy representing Colorado did a pretty bad job, or the Colorado voter. I mean, he seemed pretty, he was getting dragged, as they say on Twitter, for not being prepared to answer a lot of their questions. But, they seem to think that it's going to be a federal issue and that there are fact questions of did he, how do we define that he did insurrect? And so it's not a shock, but he's got other cases that are much more pressing. Well,
to that point, there was a piece in Slate yesterday suggesting that the Supreme Court's endured such reputational damage, being seen as highly partisan, that they may make some sort of a split decision, that they'll say he can stay on the ballot, but they'll rule against him in the case where he argues he's immune from prosecution for trying to overturn the 2020 election. Monica Ang, do you think that would do anything to repair the damage to the court's reputation?
Well, I guess we'll have to see. I mean, I was surprised that even Elena Kagan, who is sort of a more reliable progressive, she said, should we be letting a single state decide who gets to be on the ballot? And so there was more than just resistance from the conservative court justices.
I'm sure they will offer it as like a sort of balance, and like a fake balance, but they're not the same thing. One is pretty novel, and one is this crazy idea that the president is a king, and that presidents are kings and queens, and they can never be prosecuted for anything, which is it's just not going to hold up, or else the country's not going to hold up.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a war over whether we should be represented by kings and queens a while back. Shia Kappas, a Cook County judge in the meantime, said a challenge to Trump's eligibility to appear on the Illinois ballot can move forward. How likely is that challenge to prevail, or to have any real, say in the matter here?
I think it will go forward, but they're going to look at whatever happens at the Supreme Court, and I wouldn't be surprised if it all happened around the same time. The Cook County folks got it because the Illinois State Elections Board didn't want to deal with it because they felt it wasn't really their place to be deciding whether he was an insurrectionist or not. It felt to them more like it was a legal issue. And now the legal issue will just depend on what happens in the Supreme Court, I think. Yeah,
it certainly seems like that's very likely to Trump. I'm sorry. Any of the other state or local level cases that are going on here?
It was really interesting that a University of Chicago professor was the first one to sort of advance this, and he's not seen as a lefty. He's actually a member of the Federalist Society and considered an originalist. David Bott, I believe, is his name. And you can hear a really terrific podcast with him laying out the case.
Well, our civil society has not really ever been equipped to deal with anything Trump does because it's too slow. It's slow. It's gentlemanly. I think about the guy Jeffrey Clark at the Department of Justice, who was the guy that they were trying to get to finish the coup in January 2021. So it's interesting to watch how the institutions kind of are flailing around trying to figure out how do we deal with. You saw the statement by Brown Jackson about the insurrection, and if it's disorganized, it doesn't count.
Well, and did he incite it? He didn't participate in it. He says, does that mean he's part of it? You know, that's what another court will figure out too. So
isn't it kind of like late in the picture here? Shouldn't all this have been happening a couple years ago?
Which goes to my point about civil society and how slow the courts are and how slow the feds are. You know, and it's remarkable.
And even that SCOTUS is hearing this on an expedited basis, but states have already been going to the polls in primary elections and caucuses. I mean, the train is rolling down the tracks. Whether or not the legal system is equipped to take care of this in a timely manner. And I mean, to that end, Paul Sullivan, Trump's so far been barreling toward reclaiming the Republican nomination. Do these ballot challenges seem like they're having any effect on GOP primary voters?
Well, absolutely not from the looks of it. And in the polls showing that he's, increasing his lead on Biden. I remember when this all happened on January 6th, I thought, well, we don't have to worry about this guy ever again. And he seems to be using that almost like as an advertisement for vote for me because of this.
Yeah, and then we just had the report as well over the mishandling of classified documents that President Biden engaged in after he left the White House during his time as vice president, saying that he's forgetful and an older guy. I mean, is this going to be something that we look back as a Clinton emails kind of a moment? Is this going to be particularly politically damaging for Biden potentially?
It might, but then, his supporters are going to stand right behind him. J.B. Pritzker has already come out saying, look, that seems like, what did he say? I smell a rat, meaning the person who wrote the report was a Trump appointee and maybe he had political motivations to write that sort of thing.
Yeah.
In fairness, I mean, Biden is old and he does confuse people, and does that mean he can't be president? Does that mean he can't be president versus Trump?
Because Trump does the same thing too.
Sure, right. Biden does it more.
I forget stuff too.
Right,
sure. But
I can't remember 10 years ago, let alone 40.
I don't even remember my first question I asked.
No, I mean, politics is an exercise, and elections are an exercise, and I wouldn't marry you unless you were the last person on earth. And that's like, be careful what you wish for, because you might be really unhappy with X, but you don't want Y.
That's right. Well, turning to some local news, the Civilian Police Oversight Commission had a public hearing last night on the ShotSpotter gun detection technology currently used by Chicago police. This has been a matter of debate and contention for many years. Remind us why this is so controversial.
Well, the ShotSpotter is a gunshot detection technology, and it draws police to locations without a 911 call. So if we have a really great show tonight, and I go out, I get my handgun, I shoot in the air to celebrate, ShotSpotter will pick that up, and it doesn't know if there's a crime. It doesn't know if it's just some Yahoo
or a firecracker,
or a firecracker, or a car backing up.
Yeah.
And so is it effective? And then you have people who don't want police coming to neighborhoods because they think police are bad, which is part of this discussion. And so you have a really complex thing. And Mayor Johnson, who comes from a more let's call it police accountability background, he's supported by more police defund advocates, promised to get rid of this, and now it's time to pay the piper.
Well, and he did campaign on getting rid of it, but
he renewed the contract.
Right.
Once. It was more of an automatic thing, but now it's not automatic. So on February 16th, what's going to happen?
And he's hired a police chief who also likes it and endorses it.
And how awkward of a position is that for Johnson? I mean, does that sort of tie his hands?
Which is why we still don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I mean, has he given us any indication of what he plans to do in a week's time?
His office is not, but Larry Snelling, he in his speech this week, he said, it's had some benefits, but yeah, nobody's really speaking out about it. But I mean, there was that leaked report by Kim Fox's office saying that it's like less than 1% of cases result in a serious arrest.
Yeah, Mayor Johnson's going to have to figure out, who do I want to make unhappy? Do I want to make my police superintendent unhappy, who is a big believer in this? Do I want to make my supporters unhappy? Do I want to make them both unhappy by bringing it back with some reforms, but it's still the same thing? And hey, guys, we need to compromise. I don't know. It'll be interesting.
How much of it is the financial part of it? I mean, would it save a lot of money if they got rid of it, or is it just?
Well, they'd certainly save on the
Millions.
contract costs. Yeah, many millions. And if it's not, resulting in cases, as soon-to-be former state's attorney says, that could be a big savings for folks.
The ShotSpotter people say it helps policing, and there are some generally pro-law enforcement alders who have come out in favor of renewing the contract.
That's right. Another big issue the mayor is dealing with, he sat down with Governor Pritzker, Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle to discuss how best to handle new arrivals in the city amid the ongoing migrant crisis. Shia Kappas, do we know how that meeting went?
Well, the meeting, that was the second meeting. Yeah. The first meeting was called by Tony Preckwinkle, who said, Governor Pritzker, Mayor Johnson, you guys need to get together and we need to figure out how to deal with this. They did it once, they did it a second time. If you've noticed, neither the mayor nor the governor have said much more than it was a good, productive meeting. I think that must have been part of the discussion. We've got to quit talking about it and just get things done. And now they've got, migrants are out of the airport, they're out of shelters. So you're seeing maybe a little bit more action behind the scenes. Maybe it was because of that meeting. I don't know.
What we're seeing is today, this is the first day I've looked at my email from the OEMC, there are 0 migrants waiting for shelter. Back in October, 3,800 were waiting for shelter, sleeping on police floors. And the city and the state will be working over the next 6 months to combine the new arrivals and the homeless mission, which they hope will reduce some of the tension between advocates for the homeless and advocates for new arrivals.
Yeah, because certainly we've heard a lot from members of the city council saying, where was this sense of urgency? Where was all this funding, prior to all these migrants being bussed into the city of Chicago? So yeah, perhaps that could help to alleviate some of that tension. Mayor Johnson's also been getting some pushback this week from the Tribune editorial board, which we'll note is entirely separate from the newsroom, about some of his schools initiatives, one of which to remove police from schools. Greg Pratt, could this be politically perilous at a time when we've seen fatal shootings outside of Chicago public schools, just from an optics standpoint even?
Sure. I mean, that's what they would say is that the risk there, right? The thing that probably keeps them up is you take a SRO out of a school and somebody gets shot and it's a problem, or you have a mass shooting and nobody helps, or but they ran on an agenda to change the way things happen at the schools, and you run for office to do things, and now they're doing this, and the question is, how much pushback are they going to get? How hard do they go? And we won't know the answer to that for a while. But there are a lot of people that are pushing back, and there's a lot of people rooting them on.
There's a discussion about why not just let the communities decide.
Or the LSC.
Yeah,
as
and
it currently
and
stands,
make it optional. And for a school that might want it, maybe they can get it. But to draw a hard line, I think that's the big question, whether they'll do that or not.
It was the Taft principal, I think, who wrote an op-ed for the Tribune saying, hey, why can't you let my LSC decide this? And we should note that at Taft, that's a largely law enforcement community.
Yeah. There's also been some pushback over Mayor Johnson's call to put just 10 of the future elected school board seats up for election, giving him the power to appoint 11 of them, a majority of the board. Monica Eng, does Mayor Johnson risk alienating some of his base by asking for the power to have a majority say, at least for the time being?
Well, it's certainly a contradiction to run on saying, I believe it should be fully elected, then suddenly, oh, we're not mayor, oh, maybe just a half and half.
It's such a good political story, because you had the Chicago Teachers Union wanted control of the board when Mayor Lightfoot was mayor, because they had a lot of tension between the two of them. So the Teachers Union got control of the board, but now Mayor Lightfoot is gone and the union's guy is in the mayor's office, so they're like, oh, well, maybe it's okay if he has some control.
Which doesn't really do anything to knock down the argument that Mayor Johnson is just the CTU's guy through and through.
Right. The other thing is it costs a lot of money to run races, and the CTU, if it's going to run 21 races, that costs a lot of money. So they're saying, maybe we only do half of the races this time so we can save money for other things.
Well, like the old proverb goes, there's democracy and there's democracy. And here we're going to have democracy.
You can't beat City Hall. That's the proverb that always comes to mind with me.
We've already gone through a couple things here where the mayor says one thing before he's the mayor, and now he's the mayor, he's So
Sounds like a
what does
mayor.
that say?
It's a challenge, yeah. They get into office and realize, oh, there's a reason that things are that way.
Yeah, some other folks in office. Our General Assembly down in Springfield. The spring session is underway, and it actually felt like spring weather today. There's an effort to change the tipped minimum wage in Illinois. Shia, what would that mean for workers, and who's backing this change?
The same organization that brought that measure to Chicago, where tipped workers now get a minimum wage, or they will. I can't remember when it starts.
Tipped workers will have the same minimum wage as non-tipped workers.
Non-tipped, yes.
In over 4 years.
Right. And now they want to make it a statewide thing. There are 7 other states that have it, including California. The challenge is it's an election year, so it's introduced in the legislature this week, but I do not think you will see anything until after the election in November, because nobody wants to be on record voting for something with, when maybe there are restaurants in their community who might disagree with it. So they get elected in November, and then during the veto session later in November, it'll probably come up.
Yeah, these even-numbered years have a way of things getting pushed off until after the election.
And that'll give time for both sides to really talk about why it's good or bad. I mean, you're a restaurant guru, you know better.
Well, what I'm hearing from restaurants is it's sort of a blunt instrument to deal with a nuanced issue. I mean, there are a lot of servers at high-end restaurants that are making a lot of money, and it's not, and their bosses say, we're already paying them that. But if people stop tipping, then that's going to change the equation. But they also say that mom and pop restaurants, if they've got to raise it up to, I think, about $15 an hour, that'll be different. But I mean, in Chicago right now, the tip minimum wage is about 9 something. In Texas, it's $2.13. So it's not a level playing field across the nation or even the state.
And you're seeing suburbs, even like Cicero. It was a big surprise that Cicero supports it, because their restaurants are seeing people leave Cicero to go over the border and work in Chicago. Now that they've approved it, so
yeah, so some of these collar suburbs might get on board.
Right, right.
And it'll be interesting. They don't. There's a lot of organizing juice by the people who brought Mayor Johnson into office, and I'm not sure that exists in the legislature in quite the same way. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, there's also some big movement in the empty land near the South Loop known as the 78, or at least proposals for it. New renderings out this week for a proposed White Sox stadium, some interesting ideas about how to reuse the land where Sox Park currently sits. We just heard that Governor Pritzker says his office is going to meet with the developers. Paul Sullivan, who foots the bill for this if it goes forward?
Well, that's the big question. This thing it went from nowhere to the renderings in like a second, and the renderings look great. It looks cool. I think everyone I've talked to is really excited about if they do it, but no one seems very excited about paying for it. And if we know Jerry Reinsdorf, we know that he's not planning on paying for it. So I don't know. We'll have to see what they're going to do here.
Well, that Sports Facilities Authority that already funds stadiums in Chicago.
And is still paying off, guaranteed rate.
Yeah. I mean, it won't be a surprise if they take that to the legislature and say, hey, can you adjust it a little bit more for us?
In November.
Yeah.
And then the Bears are doing Bears things, so they're all over the place. And, they're going to want something from Springfield, too, in all likelihood. So you don't want to do one and then the other and go back to back. You'll want to deal with both of them at the same time. So someone's going to have to cool their jets for a little.
Well, what about that idea that the Bears would go into Sox Park?
I just don't see that happening. I mean, why would they want to
put a dome on
Sox
it?
Park, right. I think this is an admission that it was a mistake. I mean, not that building a new stadium was a mistake, but the architecture, everything was not really well received.
The Sting can have it.
The Sting,
the fire,
same thing. I mean, Chicago's not really a soccer town. And they're talking about 5 million people at this new stadium for the Sox, and there is no chance that the White Sox would draw 5 million. No team draws 5 million.
Oh, come on. You don't believe in the next rebuild?
No.
Well, and what about this idea of how they're going to potentially redevelop the land to have, a soccer stadium? They were talking about housing. They were talking about, building land on those seemingly acres of parking lots. Is that the kind of thing that could help get some, support behind this measure to maybe drum up a little public money?
Well, you're always, it's like going on a first date. You make a lot of promises and then we'll see what happens.
Well, it does seem to be trying to quell the, hey, don't leave Bridgeport in a lurch, and trying to make Alderman Nicole Lee happy that we're not going to leave you with nothing. But yeah, who knows if they'll keep that promise.
Right, because so far we've heard from Alderman Lee that, she seems like she's committed to trying to keep the Sox in Bridgeport, where they've been forever and ever. They'd still be a South Side team on this location. Yeah. Do you think fans would be likely to get on board with a move like this?
I don't think fans care anymore that it's in Bridgeport, I got to be honest. Maybe if you're in Bridgeport, but most Sox fans, they're coming from all around. They're not just coming from the South Side. We like to call them the South Side team, and it's, mostly South suburbs. But, I think if they go to the South Loop and they have a nice stadium and they pay for it mostly, I think people will be on board with that.
Speaking of a Jerry Reinsdorf property, the NBA trade deadline came and went, and the Chicago Bulls did exactly nothing.
Yeah.
Do you think that was the right call?
No, but I mean, it was not surprising. We all pretty much figured they wouldn't. People were kind of worried they might trade DeMar, their best player, or Caruso, their most popular player. It would have been nice to see him add on, but it's been 3 years in a row they've done the same thing. They just have this belief that this team is somehow going to just come out of nowhere, and it hasn't happened. So it's very frustrating for Bulls fans. On the other hand, if you look at it from Reinsdorf's perspective, they're selling out all the time. They're number one in attendance in the NBA. So people do like these players, and they like going to the state or the United Center for the games.
Yeah, I mean, they had a rocky start to the season, but they've beaten some pretty good teams this year. They, beat the Timberwolves earlier this week.
Great game, yeah.
Would it be a mistake to blow up this roster right now with the way they've been playing?
Well, blowing up, I'm with that. I wouldn't blow up the roster, but if you're trying to win, you got to do something to get something, and. Certainly, the way Kobe White's played everyone's very excited about that. Zach is injured, so they really could have used another scorer, but it's just a frustrating last 2-3 years for Bulls fans because the individual players themselves are pretty good, but the group just hasn't gelled together.
Last 2-3 years, last 2 decades, whatever.
Well, 2 decades, but this team that, they came out of the rebuild and put this team together, and since Lonzo Ball's been injured, it's really been a 500 team.
Yeah. We heard there are 3 former Bears heading to the Hall of Fame, Devin Hester, Julius Peppers, Steve McMichael. Especially emotional for McMichael and his family as he battles ALS. I mean, this really seems like a fitting tribute for him.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking story. McMichael, such a big, colorful character, and then coming down with the ALS a couple years ago. It's so great that he's at least alive to get in, and obviously with Devin Hester going in the same class. Julius Peppers played a few years for the Bears, but Devin, Monica were talking earlier.
The 92-yard
touchdown in the Super Bowl. Wow. It's just going to be a cool experience, and for a franchise that really hasn't had much going for it the last few years, so this is really a cool thing.
Yeah, Devin Hester, that kickoff return we saw, the only player to return the first kick for a touchdown in a Super Bowl game. I saw the smile on your face when we were watching the clip. What made him so special as a player to watch?
Well, I think just for that kickoff return at the beginning of a Super Bowl, that was pretty amazing. And three Bears at one time, we'll take it.
Yeah, have we had this many in a class anytime recently?
I don't think so, although they do lead the NFL in Hall of Famers. And I don't think we'll ever see another kick returner in the Hall of Fame. He's the first one, and it's a very rare thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Were you guys at the Tribune mad that sometimes leaked that early?
I was wondering about that because there is an embargo on those things. I haven't talked to anyone, but I would assume some people did break the embargo. But I'm not accusing anyone, but that's
Somebody's
usually,
getting a phone call.
Maybe somebody got a good source. They got it a different way.
Well, I think the Tribune, the Tribune knew they were going in, but they're supposed to not say anything.
Yeah. About 30 seconds left, but yeah, Peppers, 9-time Pro Bowler, a few years with the Bears, mostly Carolina, one other team to the north that I'm forgetting the name of, but a deserving introduction.
Oh, definitely. I think he's 4th in sacks all time. He had great years with the Bears. It just, he wasn't here long enough to really make a mark, but, totally one of the great rushers of all time. And, it's going to be a lot of Bears fans down there in Canton next August for the Hall of Fame game.
All right, well, we had a Hall of Fame panel tonight, so thank you all for joining us. We are out of time. My thanks to Gregory Pratt, Monica Eng, Shia Kappas, and Paul Sullivan. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation. Additional support is provided by
And that's our show for this Friday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. Now for the Week in Review, I'm Nick Blumberg. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Good night. Okay, Super Bowl Sunday, special dishes, special plans.
I wore pink for it.
Okay, there you go.
It's also Lunar New Year, so I'll just be making dumplings during Super Bowl Sunday to celebrate.
That's Taylor Swift.
But I was going to say, after the kick return, I wish the rest of the game had gone that well.
Well, closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.